Alright guys, this is History with Peidmonte, episode 1. Today we're going to talk about World War II weaponry, to an extent. I'm going to show you what the Italian infantrymen used during World War II, and how it later changed, and how it has affected us, especially me, today. There's a sort of irony. But, so, let me start by talking about the reason why I chose this subject. My grandfather is a World War II vet. He fought in Italy as an Italian soldier, I believe for roughly 2 or 3 years, towards the end of the war. I'm going to show you what the Italians used during that time, and how it differed towards the end of the war. I might even go into some details about the story with my grandfather during these times. But anyway, first we'll start with the sidearm, the Beretta M1934. I'll just take a look at it real quick. It looks similar to the Berettas today. More basic design, more primitive looking back then. It almost looks like the Beretta Cheetah, but came into service in 1937, and it was actually produced in 1934, all the way up until 1991. Over 1 million were produced in the times that it was manufactured. It was actually a 380 ACP pistol, and this was the sidearm that they used, and it was a 380. But my grandfather never used this gun, and I'll get into the reason why he didn't use it more after. The weight of the gun is 26.4 ounces. The length is 5.91 inches. The barrel length is 3.46 inches. Okay. Now, obviously, I'm reading some of this stuff off of a site because I don't remember the exacts to this gun. But you know, I know more about the other equipment my grandfather used. This was not one of the things he used, so he didn't really talk about it much. But as you can see in the pictures, if you look down towards the bottom of the handle, there is a little lever that you press in, and that would extract the magazine. It has the pinky extension. The tip of the pistol actually is a lot similar to you know what you see in most Beretta pistols, the shape and all. Barrel too on the slide is mostly the same as Berettas today. So this was the sidearm. Now you also have the rifle, which had a very bad reputation, the Carcano, and this gun had actually been around even before World War I. Alright, 1891 is when it was designed and produced in 1892, and it was produced all the way up till 1945. Now, there was a problem with this gun. The gun itself wasn't too bad. The problem with this gun was that the ammunition produced with, in Italy was inconsistent. Okay, and the reason for that was because there were different manufacturers making the ammunition and distributing it during World War II. And there was different quality and different metal use. I read one report that they had problems feeding and ejecting because there was a company that had produced copper casing, which, as we know, was is a big no-no. Now, the reason for this was because even prior to the war, Italy was on a strict budget under Mussolini's regime. The reason for that was because Italy was recovering from a financial decline prior to him becoming dictator. And Mussolini was trying his best to build up his military under a fascist rule. He actually was very successful up until World War II. World War II was the downfall of Italian growth. Now, mind you, this war was not sought after by the Italians. The thing you got to realize was that Mussolini was kind of forced into a corner, and his ally, Nazi Germany, Hitler, was moving forward and gaining all this land, and Italy had remained neutral, during the war in the beginning, but Mussolini saw that he had to start expanding too. He took Ethiopia, he took Libya, Albany. So those are some of the countries that he was able to conquer. But Italy had spent a lot of time in Spain because Spain was becoming a fascist country as well. So he had spent a lot of resources. He had actually sent over 120,000 men over to Spain to help in the revolution. So, he spent a lot of manpower and he spent a lot of his resources trying to help fascism itself grow. He firmly believed in the idea of fascism. But the Carcano, back to that, that was the main reason why the gun had problems, was not the gun itself. The gun itself was actually good design, but the problem came into play with ammunition. When you have different kinds of gunpowder being used, different casings, used for your ammunition, and even some bullets were lead, some were brass, you have a problem if you don't standardize all your equipment, and a lot of the ammunition companies remained independent. They were not, strictly under a contract with the Italian government and the Italian military, so that was a big downfall. The guns were later sold off after the war. During the Cold War, Norway bought a lot of the guns and found that they couldn't find decent ammo for them even after the war. So they remained in circulation, and even today they still do, but very little, as security for the frontier in Norway and I believe Sweden as well. So that's just something that was interesting to Carcano. They also had a bayonet, which was actually like a fold-out bayonet that they had at the end of the gun. And then we have the Beretta 30. Okay, this was the standardized machine gun for the Italian military from 1930 to 1945. Lightweight machine gun. Okay, it was widely viewed as being poorly designed. Alright, and it had a lot of functioning problems and all that. And it also, for the time that it was in use, was considered to have a slow rate of fire, especially when comparing it to the German guns. Alright, the German guns were far superior. And also the 20-round magazines used, or the clips, used for these guns really limited the amount of, damage it could do, as opposed to the MG38 and MG42 in the same amount of time. And you could imagine, 20 rounds in a machine gun is nothing, especially not in today. But even back then, it's not good. So there's really not a lot of stuff on the internet about this gun. It's not a very well known gun. A lot of these Italian guns aren't very well known, because a lot of them were replaced by German guns later in the war. Uh, you know, Germany had a bigger budget that they could spend on weaponry, and a lot of the Italian equipment was obsolete at this point. Mussolini had some of his troops, some of his elite troops, riding around on bicycles during the war. As opposed to the Germans who had these motorcycles that they could ride around in, these big jeeps. Don't get me wrong. Italy did have tanks and cannons and all that good stuff, but they just were not equipped for this war. They were rushed into it. So Mussolini rushed in to go grab Greece when he could, and it ended in failure, and Germany had to step in and help out. So they pretty much standardized the Italian army with a lot of German equipment, especially after the Allies took Sicily under a patent. Now, before I could tell you more about what my grandfather used in World War II, let me just give you some background on him. He grew up in a small town called Morgandino, which is in Asti, Peidmonte, Italy. Okay. He grew up, he's 86 years old now, but all his youth he grew up in a fascist dictatorship under Mussolini. It makes you grateful, to live in the times that we do now. And the worst part was that he actually, at some points, had to be raised by the state. His father couldn't take care of him. His mother died when he was very, very young. So you could just imagine the brainwashing that went on. The good thing is that my grandfather was smart enough not to buy into it. One of the things that I'm proud of was that my grandfather was part of the resistance. Now, he wasn't a part of King Emmanuel III's Royal Army or anything like that. He was actually a renegade, him and his cousins. And ended up doing their own thing. Oftentimes ambushing Germans. Asti is known for the mountains. It's known for the rich history and winemaking. The terrain itself is unlike any other. It's the reason why the wine there is so good, and it's actually the wine capital of the world. The grapes that grow in Asti cannot be produced anywhere else in the world, and it's because of the morning mist that it has in the mountain area. So, and that's why they charge so much for the wine and stuff. But they would ambush Nazis from the mountains, and he actually used German equipment to do the job. Now, prior to even abandoning the fascist regime, he was given German equipment. His sidearm was a Walther P-38, and his main weapon was an MG-42. He was an MG-42 operator, and he also had grenades on him, the German grenades, which resemble, they're like a stick with a grenade at the tip, and you pull the little wire and you throw it, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have played World at War, the Call of Duty games and all, and they show it in there. Or if you haven't played games in a long time, going back a couple of years, what is it called? Medal of Honor. Now, that's going back a ways. I actually had the original game, but so that's what he used a lot of times, and so that's just a little bit of background. He told me a couple of gruesome stories. One was that his neighbors were marched outside. He was in the bush, okay, hiding in a bush, because I don't know if it was his platoon or his cousins or whatever, died in an ambush, and so he ran him across Asti to his home, and he's a lone rebel. Okay, he's running all the way home. to find a place to hide. He gets there and he sees Nazis outside of his own home. His sister is taken outside. His neighbors are marched out, and his neighbors are put down on their knees for being Jews and executed one by one, the whole family. All right, and his sister is taken a prisoner of war. And the reason why she survived was because the German officer kind of had a crush for her, from my understanding. Now, my family was split apart in World War II on my grandfather's side, or my dad's side. My dad's father, he had uncles in the Africa Corps. You know, he had some of his cousins who were esteemed Nazi officers during that time throughout Italy and Switzerland and southern Germany. All Italians, of course, but they were all spread out, you know. And like I said, his uncle was one of the leading officers in the African Corps. I'll have to get the names because I don't know them off the top of my head. You know, what I can tell you is that the family was divided, and as a result, in today, my family is all over the world because the people that were in the Allied side, that or the rebel side, that left the Axis, they ended up staying in Italy or migrating to the United States. People that were in the Axis, as far as the Africa Corps goes, I believe that most of them were killed off. Let's see. The ones that were in Switzerland and Germany, some stayed in Switzerland under different aliases for a long time. They emerged later on. But the rest of them migrated to Argentina and Peru. If you know Joseph Mengele, he also migrated to South America, as well as a lot of the other runaway Nazi officers. So there's just a little something about my family history. Just thought it would be, kind of interesting to share that with you guys. My family actually goes back, recorded history, over 2,000 years by our surname. We had always been winemakers, and so my grandfather's a winemaker, and he came 12 times first place gold medal in Pennsylvania as a winemaker. So that says something. Pennsylvania is actually flooded with Italians. You had the mushroom farms. You had a lot of fertile land there, so a lot of the Italians went there. But yeah. So aside from that, the equipment he used, I'll get to that in a second. But we still have ties to people in Italy, and I have, by myself, reconnected with my family through Facebook. Believe it or not, I actually used Facebook, typed in my last name, started looking people up. Some people, they understood the English. Some people didn't, and but they had friends that could help them. So I reconnected with my family. I'm like the chronicler of my family, but we don't know exactly what our position was way back when, but it's pretty much assumed that we were of minor nobility. Asti has been around even before Rome settled in northern Italy. It was there originally named Ast, without the I, under Celtic rule. So, might even have some Celtic ancestry somewhere along the lines when Rome invaded. And then you have the Lombards who came in at the fall of the Roman Empire. And, I'll probably talk about that stuff more. Just some fun facts I wanted to add, and I did tell you that I would add some fun facts. So, alright, on to the equipment my grandfather used, some information on it. And I'll also tell you another story that's pretty interesting, especially about the Walther P38. So, we'll start that now. Okay, so as I was saying before, I was talking about how my grandfather was running back home when he got separated from the people that he was with, the other men that he was with. So what happened was he was actually walking along a road, and he was there was three Germans, three Nazis, that approached him in a vehicle, figured out who he was, and placed him under arrest. Now, my grandfather knew right away what was going to happen if he stayed with them. Alright, he was going to go to a death camp if he complied with everything that they told him to do. He knew that right away. I mean, at this point, we're talking 1944, I think it was at this point. Towards the middle or end of 1944. Everybody knew about the gas chambers at this point. I mean, within the Axis at least, it was common knowledge at this point. And so he told me that these guys were very inexperienced, young guys, and they were just on a patrol. So they gave him a quick pat down. All the while, they didn't check his socks. Really rookie move there. And he actually kept his P-38 in a sock. He didn't have a holster for it. So he wasn't even in proper uniform at this point. So he was in the seat, and they started driving off. And he made several complaints about having stomach pains, like he was going to throw up. And he kept saying it and saying it and saying it until finally they said, okay, they'll pull over on the side of the road so he can go, and cough up what he has to do. At this point, my grandfather drew his gun, shot the driver, shot the passenger, and turned around to shoot the other guy. And he can confirm the kills of the first two, but the third guy was only hit in the shoulder as he was pushing the gun away from my grandfather. My grandfather started running out of the car. The vehicle, the Jeep. Well, not the Jeep, but you know what I'm saying. He jumped on out, ran, and luckily, at this point, it was the mist was still out. The kid jumped onto the gun turret and started opening fire. He didn't know exactly where my grandfather was at this point, but he fired, and he got a lucky shot in. He hit my grandfather, and he hit him right in the arm. The bullet went through the arm, and I believe it was his right bicep. I believe it was the right bicep, but it could have been the left. But as he was running, he lost complete control of the arm. It was flying all over the place. He was telling me like you ever seen like a fish? You catch a fish, it's kind of like that. That's how his arm was moving. And so he actually had to hide under somebody else's house, a doctor in Asti, who took care of him. So that's just a little something about the Walther P-38. Now, the Walther P-38 itself is a very, very reliable pistol. It took over the place of the German Luger, which was a good gun, but the problem with it was that if it got dirty, it could jam on you and became very unreliable for that reason. The P-38 was a little bit different. It could take a little bit more, get a little more gritty, and still work. Even to this day, in small circulations that are used in militaries, they're still seen as one of the best pistol designs ever invented to this day. And just because of its sheer success, I guess that could be said to be true. I mean, it's been around not quite as long as the 1911, but it's getting up there too. Mind you, the 1911 itself is still a more popular gun, but it does say something about the design of this gun. This gun was also a 380 ACP, and it does resemble the Luger a bit, but it's a little bit different as well. So then we'll also talk about the MG42. Right before I start talking about the MG42, just One thing I was thinking about as I was making this, my existence could not be possible without two things: the Walther P-38 and World War II. Very weird. Without the Walther P-38, my grandfather would have died that day in the gas chamber, and I wouldn't be here. And if World War II hadn't happened, my grandfather wouldn't have migrated to America, and I wouldn't be here. Just weird, you know. Just a thought. So anyway, the MG42 was pretty much the main machine gun used in Nazi Germany and throughout the Axis, um, throughout the war, and became a standard for even the Italian military at this point in time. It was notorious because it fired so fast, so rapidly, that it almost sounded like the same shots it was continuously going. My grandfather would even tell you that. So this gun stacked up the casualties on the Allied side big time. There's no question about it. And the reason why it was used so much with the Germans, and the reason why it was designed, was because they knew that there was a chance that there might be a multi-front war, and to take the place of several soldiers, they would have one or two MG42s going off, and it would rack up casualties like no tomorrow. Germany was a very big nation at this time, huge army, but even still, things like this were needed. You had the Russians, you had the United Kingdom, you had France, you had Norway, and you had the United States to deal with. Now, some of those countries were conquered. France was conquered. Norway was conquered. London itself was under constant bombardment. I don't need to tell you that. But this gun offered immense relief to Axis soldiers, and it actually prolonged the Italian campaign for Patton. Even though he didn't face a lot of resistance, he did face many MG42 along the way, and he probably would have been able to conquer Italy much faster had these guns not been there. The MG42 is pretty much based on the MG38, and it's a more advanced design. They pretty much perfected the MG38 and the MG42. So, this was, I don't want to say the backbone to the ground forces, but it definitely gave the support needed to sustain smaller armies and patrols, and came in handy for them, especially on the high ground. And this was also something that the Americans faced on D-Day. They faced many MG42, and that was a big reason for the casualties on the beach. It's a damn thing to think about, all those boys that died that day. Just landing on the beach, not even getting a chance to land, and just being slaughtered like that. So, don't mean to get emotional, just it's a sad thing. And yeah, war. I take an interest in war, but it's never a good thing. All those young men that died in service to their country, and in service, in this case, to humanity. Had the Axis won, it would have been very bad for all of us. We're talking about genocide here. It's the worst thing in the world is genocide. Killing a race of people for nothing more than, being a different race of people. Pretty much, Hitler was trying to exterminate the Gypsies, the Slavs, and the Jews. And you can only imagine what would have been next in his plans had he succeeded in World War II. And I'm thankful that the Allies had come in to help King Emmanuel, because the Italian language might be extinct right now, or on the verge of it, had Hitler won. And I do believe that had Hitler succeeded, that he would eventually have turned his gaze to Italy, broke that alliance, and conquered it. Him or his successors, however long it took. So, it was a fragile alliance. It always has been. And anyone that tells you differently is a fool. The Italian people never liked Hitler. They never trusted Hitler. On the whole. Now, you did have the supporters, because the black shirts and the fascists, they were pro-Mussolini, and Mussolini was allied to Hitler, so they were pro-Hitler as well. And a lot of them converted to Nazism from fascism. But the thing is that most of the Italian people hated Hitler, and it is the main reason, that led up to Mussolini's hanging. Okay? People hated Mussolini after that decision that he made to ally with Hitler. Many Italians didn't like him. And prior to that, Mussolini was seen as a savior of Italy. So it just shows you how things have changed after this point. Something to be aware of. So, now I know there's a lot of people out there, I've seen it on YouTube a lot, where people have been hating a lot on the Italian people. And it's a damn shame, because they don't know the first thing about what happened in that war. You get what you get from the books that you learned from the school. You scratch the surface and you say you know it all. That's just a shame. Now I'm not pro-Axis, so don't get me wrong. And but I do want to say this as well, that the German people suffered a lot too. Even under Hitler's reign, even before Stalin came in, okay, they were under a lot of pressure. They faced poverty. People lost their homes. They were forced to house soldiers. Much like, it almost sort of reminds me of the Revolutionary War, where the British came in and were forcing the colonials to comply with all their demands, and so that's just a thing. So my hat's off to all the men that died, and all the people that died in that war, and it's a very sad thing. Well, I hope you liked this first episode. There will be definitely a lot more to come. Give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. So that's it for this episode, though. Peidmonte 89 out. Thank you for watching.